very strong now on the border. They're going to put soldiers there.
The tariffs that are wide-ranging and have been imposed or threatened on our North American allies will not lower costs on hardworking American taxpayers. They will raise them.
Every penny that we spend in foreign aid needs to be in furtherance and aligned with the national interest and the foreign policy of the United States.
The fact that they're being told not to show up, that the federal aid is being frozen, I mean, it's just such disrespect. They deserve better.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, trade talks, lots of them today, with just hours before President Trump's threatened tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada were scheduled to go into effect. Well, Mexico negotiated a month-long reprieve. In return, Mexico says it will send thousands of soldiers to the southern border with the mission, they say, of stemming the flow of fentanyl and those illegally entering the U.S. And very late today, those threatened tariffs on Canada also paused for 30 days. In return, that country says it will implement, not too many details here, but a dollar figure, a $1 billion plan to increase border security.
Canada is very tough. They're very, very tough to do business with, and we can't let them take advantage of the U.S.
Also, reshaping U.S. foreign policy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio visits Panama after President Trump threatens yet again to seize the Panama Canal. Rubio's message to officials in Panama about Chinese influence of the canal and migrants looking to come to America.
If you come and you come irregularly, you may be stopped and you may be returned to your country of origin.
Plus, USAID in danger. Over the weekend, Elon Musk threatened to, quote, unquote, eliminate the main U.S. agency handling foreign assistance. Today it was announced USAID will be merged into the State Department. However, that action appears to need congressional approval, and it could come at some cost. I want to start tonight with Caitlin Huey-Burns, Jennifer Jacobs, and Ed O'Keefe. Ed O'Keefe is in Panama. Jennifer Jacobs on the north lawn of the White House. Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill. But Caitlin spent most of the day at a confusing and somewhat rattled USAID headquarters here in Washington. Ed, I want to start with you. Marco Rubio had this to say today about USAID and his frustrations therewith. Let's listen.
My frustration with USAID goes back to my time in Congress. It's a completely unresponsive agency. It's supposed to respond to policy directives of the State Department, and it refuses to do so.
So, Ed, from your vantage point, where does that leave things?
Well, Marco Rubio is now going to try to do something that Madeleine Albright once tried to do during the Clinton administration, and that is merge the primary foreign assistance agency of the United States into the State Department and take more control over how exactly American taxpayer money is distributed to aid programs around the world. Remember, this is a program that provides a lot of relief to some of the world's hungriest, poorest, most violent areas, perhaps best known for dropping assistance in after natural disasters. It is not hyperbole to say that there are people around the world named USAID because their parents at one time saw the bags arrive with the USAID logo and said, well, why don't we name him that? Or why don't we name her that? Those people are out there, and it's because of the aid they've received in the past. But Republicans for years have argued this is a taxpayer waste agency because of the kinds of programs it may ultimately fund. There's concerns about the family planning aspects of the aid they give out. Today, the White House was rattling off a handful of very small but specific examples of funding being used for so-called DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion programs in far-flung parts of the world, they believe unnecessarily. So what happens now, according to the White House and the State Department, is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is now in charge of the agency. He's designated a deputy to start reviewing all the money. And over the weekend, we saw Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency team go into that agency, take hold of the email, take hold of the payment systems, and begin this systematic review. Not unlike what we saw them do last week with the government's HR department, the Office of Personnel Management, and with those calls to federal employees across the government to consider taking the so-called deferred resignation plan that would have them paid through the end of the fiscal year.
Ed, thank you very much. Stand by, please. I want to bring in Jennifer Jacobs on the North Lawn. So this is part of a larger Trump administration initiative to either streamline, make things more efficient. Does it feel at the White House, Jennifer, that this is a intentionally aggressive set of moves by Elon Musk?
Well, Trump has authorized him to be aggressive. And as you saw overnight, Elon Musk was very confident on X, his social media platform, in saying that he believed that this was going to be shut down, that USAID was going to be killed. He said he had spent time feeding it into the wood chipper. It is not. It is still going to exist as a humanitarian aid agency. It just will be transformed. So I was told that funding will possibly be cut. There was discussions today in the West Wing about how much funding for USAID should be chopped. The workforce will be reduced significantly. That's certain. It was unclear today how much funding that they were going to cut. As you know, it's congressionally mandated funding, and Congress feels very strongly about the government spending the money that it appropriates. But Elon Musk was not correct when he was tweeting overnight, posting overnight, that this agency was going to go away completely. My sources told me that there were some top Trump advisors who disagreed with that stance and argued for preserving USAID and explained the reasons why it does need to still exist, but it just will be transformed and tailored to more closely match what Trump's stances are, and it'll be messaged more as dishing out money to help U.S. national interests.
And Jennifer, it's also worth pointing out that if an agency doesn't fully please the administration, that doesn't make it a criminal organization, though Elon Musk has so alleged. I want to turn now to Caitlin Huey-Burns. Caitlin, I mentioned you were at USAID today. Senate Democrats and House Democrats joined Senate Democrats there. You talked to Chris Van Hollen, Democratic senator from Maryland. I want to listen to what he told you.
Are you opposed to USAID being moved over to the State Department, or what is the bigger issue?
So I'm fine considering any proposal that people want to put forward in a legal way. This is an illegal action. If you want to reorganize the State Department and AID, what you do is you propose changes to the law. I mean, AID was established by congressional statute, right? You can't just change it.
So, Caitlin, what was it like there? And were you able to engage at all with any of the employees who were either in or trying to get into their office?
Yeah, Major, it was quite a scene, and it just speaks to the way in which USAID workers were informed of all of this in the first place, some going to figure out if they could get into the building. I talked to others who were contractors who had been fired a couple of days ago. Some USAID workers, as Jennifer just mentioned, are still working, but a lot of the contractors who were working on highly, specified, complicated aid relief efforts are just no longer able to work. And I actually was talking to a group of them earlier, and they didn't want to go on camera because they're worried about any repercussions that they may face coming down the line, which I think is an interesting development as well. But several of them were making the point to me that this is not about a government job. They were kind of making the point, who really cares about government workers? This is about the kind of work they were doing, and that's the message that they want to amplify. I will say up here on Capitol Hill, there is a fascinating dynamic happening in these early days of the Trump administration, which is, what is the role of Congress here when you have an executive branch exerting a lot of executive authority? That runs counter to what a lot of Republicans have been talking about for years, and yet we've seen Republicans, by and large, be pretty much okay with the actions that the Trump administration is taking because, in their view, it leads to the shrinking of government. But it was interesting, Major, I just spoke with Roger Wicker, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, who did raise some concern, has been supportive of the idea of USAID being in place, though he wants to see reforms, but as a way to counteract efforts by countries like China and others who are trying to exert their influence as well. So there's a national security component to this that a lot of lawmakers here on Capitol Hill will be talking about, but we're seeing, at least in these early days, there's not a appetite really for Republicans to go against Donald Trump here and kind of waiting to see how this plays out. But when it comes to USAID, it's just important to underscore the kind of work that is immediately has been halted.
Caitlin, thank you very much. Ed, I want to go back to you briefly in Panama because you're there. And there's this conversation, U.S. demands of the Panamanian government. Where do they stand currently?
Well, picking up on the concerns about the influence of Russia and China around the world, that was the point of having Marco Rubio come here on his first overseas trip as Secretary of State to Panama, the home of the canal that was built by the Americans, finished in 1913, handed back to the Panamanians in 1999. And in the last several weeks leading up to the inauguration, President Trump started raising concerns about Chinese influence, mentioned it in his inaugural, sent Rubio here to reinforce the U.S. message. Don't let China take control. Their concern is there's a port in the southern part of the canal on the Pacific side, controlled by a Hong Kong-based company, which operates dozens of ports around the world, and a Chinese company building a bridge on the southern side, near the Bridge of the Americas, which was one of the first. The argument being, from Rubio, if you're a Chinese company, you're somehow aligned with the Chinese Communist Party. If the Chinese Communist Party tells you to block the canal because of some other issue, you've got to stop doing that. Rubio said, please, don't let it happen. The Panamanians turned around and said, we're cutting our deals. The China Belt and Road Initiative, that's an early feather in the cap of the Secretary as he continues a week-long trip to Central America and the Caribbean to reinforce U.S. influence in this part of the world. Major.
Great to have Ed O'Keefe in Panama. I also want to thank Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill, Jennifer Jacobs on the North Lounge. Thank you all very much. Ukrainian officials are dealing with a lot right now. Among the things that they are keeping their minds on, the Trump administration's pause on all foreign assistance programs, how that decision might impact that war-torn country. Next, we'll speak with Ukraine's Commissioner for Human Rights. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. As Ukraine fights to retain its sovereignty now for almost 3 years after being attacked by Russia, it is, in the moment we're speaking of right now, also somewhat distracted by an announced freeze of some duration in U.S. foreign development aid and the possibility that that assistance might not come back. Since the start of the invasion, as I mentioned, USAID says it has provided more than $30 billion in direct budget support to the Ukrainian government and an additional $2.6 billion in specific humanitarian assistance. Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, joins us now. Dmytro, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. As I mentioned, it's been almost 3 years. The United States and Europe have been supporting the Ukrainian government in many ways. USAID provides humanitarian direct financial support, not military assistance. How concerned are you or those around you about this pause in that assistance?
Thank you for having me. And on the beginning, I want to express my gratitude on behalf of Ukrainian people to American people for supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian nation since the full-scale invasion by Russian Federation started. And you know, exactly now we have more than 4,000 days of this aggression, because Russia started aggression against my country from 2014. You know, we appreciate for the position and support in humanitarian issues, humanitarian projects by American governments through USAID or through another projects. What it means for us, yeah, I see that now we have negative impact in Ukraine. Because, for example, a lot of humanitarian projects, for example, rebuilding schools, kindergarten, supporting more vulnerable groups of Ukraine, it were by these projects. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I visited Zaporizhia. You know, Zaporizhia, one of the regions that's nearly front line.
Right.
And I saw several new kind of schools. Can you imagine? Bunkers schools. Ukrainian children need to go to these underground schools, and only on this way they can study, learn. So now I see that several projects will stop, suspended.
Right.
And exactly for me as an ombudsman of Ukraine, I can't imagine how we can finish a lot of humanitarian projects without supporting American government.
Dmitry, for the benefit of my audience, so the way to think about it, as I understand it, this aid comes in, allows the Ukrainian government to build, as you mentioned, schools, other things destroyed by attacks from Russia, while Ukraine can then put all of its financial wherewithal behind the war itself. That's how it works. So this backfilling, essentially, from U.S. and Europe allows Ukraine to put the most formidable force militarily toward Russia.
You know, I think that the main idea for Ukraine to provide similar projects is to show to Russian Federation that we will live on our territory. Because we are not fight for the territory, we are fight for the people. And the main idea, I think, that the Russian Federation tried to destroy its civilian infrastructure. As a result, millions of Ukrainian people left our territory. So without these humanitarian projects, mothers with children need to go to another countries. Automatically, the population will be less and less, and our skill for the fights will be less and less. So if we every day together understand that we fight for the whole democratic world, we need to be together. So in this way, it's on some case supporting our fightings against Russian Federation. So I want to use this opportunity once again to emphasize that we really appreciate for the supporting American people, but please try to understand us that we need to continue these humanitarian projects, because without, we will lost.
What effect does this pause have, if any, on the context or possibility of a negotiated peace?
You know, I believe that we have a common position, that we believe in peace through strength. And I think that this is absolutely understandable for all of us, for Ukrainian people, for American people, and for the whole world. Because if we will think only for the peace, immediate peace, and we will lose territory, we will lose people, we will lose economy, we will lose Ukrainian army, it will mean that we will lose our rules for every country. So, but this is the basis of democratic countries for the democracy. So I suppose that American governments will support idea of Ukraine to do everything
from a position of strength.
Yeah, for the receiving just peace. Just peace, not only for Ukraine and Ukrainians, just peace for the whole world. If not, the whole country, now it's Russian Federation, but it can be any country who think about aggression can be sure that I can start this aggression and I will have no negative impact to this country. So we need to have common rules for every country. So this is the basis of Charter of United Nations Organization, and I suppose all understands that if Ukraine will lose in this war, it will open a new aggression through the world.
Dmitry Lubinets, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
As President Trump remakes the Environmental Protection Agency, what does the future look like for it and its workers and its mission? Well, we'll take a deeper look on that next. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Hundreds of employees at the Environmental Protection Agency have been advised they're at risk of losing their jobs. More than 1,100 EPA employees who are less than a year into their current roles, even though some of them may have worked in other roles within the EPA for years, have received an email warning that they could be terminated. I want to bring in Tracy Wolf of our CBS News Climate Unit. Tracy, as you know, attitudes from administrations can change, politically and otherwise. You've talked to people at the agency. Does this feel different to them? Do they feel in real jeopardy?
Yes. So in speaking to union officials, former EPA employees that talk to their current colleagues, the morale is incredibly low. In fact, the head of the union for the EPA said she's been there 30 years, and this is the worst she's ever seen the morale. It is a very chaotic state inside the agency at the moment, and there's a lot of fear among the employees.
And Tracy, I tried to allude to this. We're not talking about, because people might conceive of, oh, these are just temps or people who just got there. In some cases, they might have less than a year in a job, meaning they're brand new to the agency. But as I understand it from your reporting, that's not true of all of these folks.
Correct. So what the union rep told me was more than 1,100 employees received this email. To your point, some of them have been at the agency for less than a year, but some of them were tenured employees who've been in federal work for decades, who may have transferred into the agency or maybe in a new role internally in the agency, and they also received this message.
And Tracy, does it come across in this context for these employees what the goal of the incoming Trump administration is with the EPA itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we're seeing with the USAID agency at the moment may be a blueprint for how they're going to try to interact with some of these other agencies. We know that the Environmental Protection Agency is a very large workforce, more than 15,000 employees, has a budget of $9 billion. And a lot of the work of the EPA, I would argue, stands in direct opposition to what President Trump aims to do with his political and economic agenda. And so I imagine that they are hoping to purge a lot of these employees to help cut down on the red tape of the environmental oversight and bureaucracy that goes into environmental permitting, especially for a lot of energy projects that the president aims to develop over his next term.
And yet there are those who would say the EPA is there to provide a safer America environmentally. Is that in jeopardy?
That's a good question. You know, the EPA's role is to protect health and human health and the environment. That is what many of these employees have dedicated their lives to. And so there is definitely a concern that should all of these employees be purged, who will be there to do the work? And more importantly, a lot of these employees help oversee grants that have been handed out all across the country, local, state, private sectors to do some of this work. If those employees aren't there to help oversee the grants, then what happens?
Tracy Wolf, thank you very much. The longtime leader of Minnesota's Democratic Party, well, has a new job. It is to lead the Democratic National Committee. How Ken Martin won despite failing to have the backing of some very prominent, well-known Democrats here in D.C. That's next. You are watching America Decides.
The fight is for our values. The fight is for working people. The fight right now is against Donald Trump and the billionaires who bought this country.
That is Ken Martin. Over the weekend, he won election to be new chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Our Hunter Woodhull followed this story very well for CBS News. He joins me now. How did Ken Martin win, Hunter?
Major, this was a really odd and compelling race, but I have to remind folks, this was a race where only about, around a little over 400 Democrats were actually voting. So, you've had more people probably vote in small city council, elections in some places. Ken Martin was able to win this because he's a longtime state party chair. He has relationships across the party, and I remind people who are saying, who is this guy? He's overseen a party that covers a span from Ilhan Omar, progressive, to Amy Klobuchar, more of a centrist moderate Democrat in Minnesota. So he's built an interesting coalition as a state party chair, and he was able to do that effectively in this race.
So what is he, a progressive or a moderate?
He's somebody who wants to win, and that's the best way I can describe him, because, he can say some days, oh, I'm a progressive, I feel this way, but he's also somebody who, as state party chair in Minnesota, they have not lost a statewide race since he took over as state party chair, I believe, back in 2011. That's a winning streak that was able to kind of propel him forward. He looks at ideology, but he's all about kind of turning out those voters and making sure that Democrats have the best chance to win.
Hunter Woodhull, thank you very much. I want to bring in our political panel. Justin Safey is a Republican strategist who served as a senior advisor to Jeb Bush. We all remember Jeb Bush. Chuck Rocha, Democratic strategist, senior advisor to Bernie Sanders' presidential campaigns. Chuck, I miss having you here at the table because I know I'm in the presence of greatness when I see that big cowboy hat. What you're doing in New York, I don't even want to begin to ask, but I'm glad you're with us. Chuck, you considered running for the position. Ken Martin just won. What's your takeaway now that the decision's been made by the DNC?
I was down there on Saturday before I come up to the big city of New York City Saturday. On Saturday, I was down there, and I got to watch the whole thing unfold. Here's a few things that stuck with me, and I've been a Democrat, a yellow dog Democrat, for 35 years, is that I would remind everybody that I think there's a little bit of a change happening, which is a good thing in the Democratic Party. The fellow who lost, and the good state party chairman from Wisconsin, Ben Wickler, was endorsed by Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Jeffries, and Chuck Schumer, and 3 of the biggest labor unions in America, and he lost. That should tell you a lot about the Democratic Party, Major. You've been covering the Democratic Party for a long time, and those are some big names. And normally those folks who come together, they don't lose, and they lost. So I think Ken Martin may be changing this thing for a change, not for the better or worse. Nothing against Nancy Pelosi or Jeffries or Chuck Schumer. Please still hire me. But I will tell you that I think that something's going on in the Democratic Party, and there's a lot of people that's fed up.
And briefly, Chuck, that thing that's going on, what do you think it might be?
That we've been doing the thing the same way for a long time. And it's like my granddaddy said, if you keep on doing the same thing over and over again, you're a fool if you think it's going to change.
Got it. Justin, I want to talk to you about the big headline-grabbing confirmation hearings last week, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel. Specifically, Tulsi Gabbard. The president was asked about Tulsi today. Sitting behind the Resolute desk, he says, I don't guarantee anything. But she's up there. Again, an opportunity to weigh in, to tell Senate Republicans, hey, rally around Tulsi. Didn't do it. Do you think she's in any trouble?
Well, she's going to have a vote in the Senate committee tomorrow. And if 1 or 2 Republicans don't vote to support her, the Democrats are united against her. I think it's a toss-up, quite honestly. The president not coming out and giving her that strong backing. I think there's some allies of his in the Senate that have some serious reservations of her. And there was a lot of concern about the fact that she did not call Edward Snowden, who shared some of the top secrets of the United States publicly. She did not refer to him as a traitor. That was a big sticking point for a lot of Republicans.
The president was asked about that, and he didn't weigh in on that at all. He just said, I don't get involved. Again, kind of an opportunity to throw her a lifeline. One was not thrown, at least to my ear. Is that the way you heard it?
That's the way I heard it, too. And so it's going to be up to the Senate. And again, I think President Trump should get credit for allowing the Senate to do its deliberative process and allowing them to make their decision.
What about RFK Jr.?
RFK Jr. took some heated questions, but I think he will be confirmed. I think he'll be confirmed ultimately. There's not that same level of concern amongst Republicans that there was with Tulsi Gabbard. And, you know, typically there's always one person for every administration, Democrat or Republican, that doesn't make it through the process. It's really hard for the Senate not to confirm 2 nominees of any president from any party. So if Tulsi Gabbard is, for some reason, isn't confirmed, I think that increases the likelihood that RFK Jr. isn't.
You know Susie Wiles well. You're experienced in Florida politics. Evaluate her first couple of weeks. Not President Trump's, but Susie's. As chief of staff, so everyone understands.
Well, Susie's one of her many, many strengths is that she stays behind the scenes. She famously did take the microphone when it was offered to her by President-elect Trump on election night. And so I think she's done a great job. The president is off to a good start with the executive orders and all the other actions he's taken. The situation with Colombia, forcing Colombia to take back their citizens. The negotiation, we heard the news today about Mexico is going to send thousands of troops to help secure the southern border of the United States. President Trump is racking up some wins, and I think that she's been supportive of the president and his team, allowing them all to do their jobs.
Chuck, it's never too early to imagine a presidential campaign. You know that. The Washington Post had a story over the weekend name-checking 12 Democrats who might be worthy of consideration. I know it's way too early to ask this question, so I won't ask who's the front runner. That's ridiculous. But as Democrats try to figure out the way forward, what's the most important thing to do? Strategically and legally block President Trump or begin to campaign for the nomination?
Major, me and you've been on the campaign trail a lot, and you know there's two things that these folks have to do. You have to give the American people a reason to fire the Republican Party and Donald Trump. But you also, and this is the part that Democrats have been missing, you have to give people a reason to hire you. It's good enough to just say, we thought it was good enough just to say, Donald Trump is crazy, and all kinds of crazy stuff's going to happen in Washington, D.C., a la what's happening right now. But then you have to pivot and say, but this is our vision for America, and our vision is better. And you're going to start seeing more and more of these quote-unquote front-runners, some of which may or may not have already called good old Chuck Rocha. But let them know that you've got to get out there and distinguish yourself right now.
And Chuck, over the weekend, Rahm Emanuel, someone I know you know well, I know well, wrote a piece in the Washington Post saying, you know, Democrats love to talk about kitchen table economic issues, but they don't talk about other things that bother Americans: homelessness, culture, crime. Agree?
Yes, and you got to get out there and get some scuffs on you. The Republican Party has done a great job at messaging to people, making them think that they feel their pain. I don't think they feel it at all. Democrats have to do a better job of old Bill Clinton looking into the camera and going, I feel your pain.
Chuck Rocha in New York doing God knows what. Justin Safey here at the table. Safe and secure. Thank you both. Privacy concerns in Washington prompt a lawsuit. How a new email system at the federal government's, kind of think about it, its Human Resources Office is being linked to, you guessed it, Elon Musk, and why some say the moves around this could violate the law. That's next. You're watching America Decides. Now, you might not think this next story matters to you, but it very well might. The Trump administration has begun using the Office of Personnel Management to send government-wide emails to federal employees acting anonymously. Have filed a lawsuit citing significant security risks and argues this process leaves the government vulnerable, and maybe even you, to hackers. I want to bring in Billy Mitchell, who's been covering this for Scoop News Group. Billy, it's great to have you with us. I want to play for you some sound from President Trump today, asked about Elon Musk's authority and what he, meaning the president, might do to restrain it. Let's listen.
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him, and it's only if we agree with him. He's a very talented guy from the standpoint of management and costs, and we put him in charge of seeing what he can do with certain groups and certain numbers. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't.
So, Billy, this is the first time I've heard the president say out loud that there will be some restraints on Elon Musk. That's very much been on the minds of congressional Democrats and either federal labor unions or employees. I mean, does Musk have authority to do basically anything?
Your guess is as good as mine. It seems at this point he has no one holding him back. He's entered now several agencies. You mentioned OPM at the top of the conversation. It was the first one, and I think of it as sort of the opening salvo, that canary in the coal mine, because he entered OPM and really didn't have anyone resisting. He doesn't, by all accounts, have the clearance or the authorization to enter and handle these systems, that government information. And in the federal bureaucracy, there's a lot of controls in place so that your average person, even government employees themselves, can't just plug in a USB drive to a system. There's concerns about that. So it seems that they've come in and now it's moved on to other agencies, GSA, the Treasury, and as recently as over the weekend, USAID, with all going on there. And it seems like, although the president says he's vetting it, he's giving him the control, does he have the clearance? Is he approved? And are they taking the care with those systems that they should be?
And I well remember, Billy, covering the Obama White House in 2015 when Office of Personnel Management garnered tremendous global headlines because there had been an intrusion, a hacking. And it wasn't all that sophisticated. Basically, the hackers just sat there for a while, waited to see if anyone would, if I remember correctly, you correct me if I'm wrong, detect them and then pulled stuff out.
Absolutely. They went through a third-party contractor, some systems that, were unassuming and went after the crown jewels, so to speak. And that's how.
And when you say crown jewel, help my audience understand what it means. What's there?
It's 20. Well, in that case, it was 22 million records from then current and former federal employees that the Chinese took and now have this huge profile of the federal workforce.
So Office of Personnel Management now, that's what OPM means. If there's a third party, Elon Musk, and a server that's unsecured, it raises real questions.
Exactly. It's that analogy that we hear all too often about how people's homes are being hacked because they have smart refrigerators or smart toasters, and they're like, why do I need to secure my toaster? Well, that's how a bad actor can get in. You find this back door, and then you can infiltrate the rest of the network. In this case, there's a server that reportedly the Musk team with the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, has set up unauthorized on site. And if that doesn't have the right security controls in place, a bad actor, China, Russia, whoever it might be, could target that, especially as they're blasting out these emails, and it's very public that they're doing so. So this system, by all accounts, is probably hooked up to many other systems within OPM that contains all those retirement benefits, the federal workforce information, reviews, and things like that about the federal workforce. So that's one concern, is that somebody can just backdoor this through this server.
And this lawsuit that's been filed, does it seek an injunction? Does it want a federal judge to basically say, unhook that server and stop what you're doing?
Exactly. So the thing that the two anonymous federal employees who filed this lawsuit take account with is something that is based on a 2002 law that requires any time a federal agency sets up a system that collects, hosts, or disseminates federal information, they have to do a privacy impact assessment. Simply put, that's, we got to demonstrate that we're going to take care of the information that these systems are collecting and make that public. Because they set up this server in such a hasty manner, they didn't do that by all accounts. And so therefore, this system
is in violation of the law.
It's in violation of the law. So this system sitting there, and again, it's potentially opening the door for somebody to come in and backdoor it.
Any sense, Billy, that this will be considered on an expedited basis, considering the security implications?
Well, I would hope so for a couple of reasons. One, they continue to move on to other agencies, and they're doing the same thing at other ones where they're taking control of systems. In the Treasury's case, the federal payment system. At USAID, you're closing out people's access to email and things like that as they shutter the agency. And so it needs to be done quickly if they want to stop that movement, if it is in fact illegal. Additionally, they may have accomplished what they set out to accomplish. I think there's different levels of nefariousness in terms of what you might suspect the DOGE to be doing. They could be using it to mine data about the federal workforce to aim their agenda. They could be taking it, exporting it, and doing whatever else they might want to do with it, which is an absolute red flag 9/11 type alarm.
Right, under the heading of whatever else they might do with it. Billy Mitchell, you're watching. We're glad you're watching. Please come back.
Thank you.
So I guess you can set aside Michelle Obama's somewhat famous plea, when they go low, we go high, why this influencer, God, I love to say that word, influencer, is telling Democrats to get mean. We'll speak with her next, right here on America Decides.
Not all of us were meant to be Miss Rachel liberals, okay? Not all of us were meant to be Michelle Obama, Jack Schlossberg liberals. Some of us were meant to be Regina George liberals. Y'all did it your way, and we're doing it our way.
Regina George liberals. That was viral TikTok influencer Suzanne Lambert explaining and defending her growing celebrity as a, quote, this is the quote, mean Democrat. Lambert has built a following, you should know, of more than 500,000 on TikTok. Her videos have been viewed millions of times and significantly garnered more than 10 million likes. Here is one of her most popular, where she mocks Republicans who criticize her, and she does it through kind of a makeup tutorial.
Rather than using a brush, we're actually just gonna apply directly to the skin and use our hands. That way it's streaky, it doesn't blend well. Now I've got my driest mascara that I'm just gonna kind of make sure you get a little on the eyelids too, and don't clean it up, just for the full effect. Let me know how I did.
How'd you do? Well, I don't really fret over that whole eye makeup thing, but Suzanne Lambert is with us to explain her journey. And one of the things I want to ask you about, first, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Me.
I read that you in high school were involved in a Republican club. Talk to my audience about the journey from there to now.
Yeah, sure. Not only was I involved, I was the president.
Okay.
In fact, I grew up in a town where that was kind of the norm. It was very conservative, right? That's all that I really knew. Most of influences around me were very conservative, and I remained conservative until after college. I campaigned for Romney in college. I was part of college Republicans, and something happens when you're around people who are different than you, and you meet people with new experiences and new things to say, and that's where my views changed, thankfully.
And was there a particular public policy issue or decision that accelerated that change?
Yeah, women's reproductive rights.
Okay.
When you find yourself in that situation, maybe unexpectedly, it all of a sudden shifts your belief on something that you may have held your entire life. All that it takes is one moment, really, to make you open your eyes and think, oh, this is what people were talking about when they said access is so important.
Rachel McAdams would want all of us to know that Regina George is a cultural touchstone who needs no explanation. But for the few who might, explain. And when you say Regina George liberal, what do you mean? Or Democrat?
So, yeah, I love Mean Girls, of course. And Regina George, she has a lot of flaws. She's not a perfect character. Right. We're all flawed, right? But one thing that Regina is really good at, she's good at organizing. She's good at garnering attention. She hits back. She sticks up for herself. And that's something that we haven't seen historically from Democrats, from other liberals. And after the election, all the messaging was around how we're going to get through this with love and peace and kindness. And sure, those things are true, but I was like, I can't do another 4 years of this, especially given everything they're doing.
You're a little low on the peace and joy part, right?
I mean, yeah, and I think, too, that, you know, there is a lot of love in fiercely advocating for people and policies, and that's what it's all about.
Thinking about the campaign, do you think the emphasis that Kamala Harris put on joy was a mistake?
I don't know that it was a mistake, but I think that there were so many moments where we really could have fought back more or taken a step back and been like, look at these people. Look at what they're doing, right?
From your vantage point, does ferocity need to be met with ferocity?
I would say so. I mean, people will be like, you shouldn't fight fire with fire. I'm like, well, I'm not a firefighter. You don't want me fighting fires. I put aluminum foil in the microwave, like, fairly recently, right? I'm not in charge of fire response.
That didn't work out well, I'm gathering.
No, it didn't. Funny thing about that. But I would also say you don't fight fire with a little drippy water hose. You fight fire with equal exertion of force, and I think that we need to do that.
And you've talked in your videos about comments like, oh, don't be so harsh, don't be so piercing, don't be so judgmental. And your reply is, in general?
In general, I mean, men do it all the time, right? Look at Steve Colbert. Look at Jon Stewart. They've been doing this, right? Humor has been a cornerstone of politics for the entirety of our history, but typically you see it coming from men. And you don't see people in Jon Stewart's comments telling him to be nice. Right. You're so mean. They might say other things.
Guys get a free pass.
Yeah. I mean, to an extent, yeah, they don't tell them to be nice. So when it's a woman doing it, people are like, whoa, 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 this is really mean. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. I'm glad you're getting it.
What's the future for you?
As far as my approach and what I want to do.
And this advocacy and this visibility, because I'm sure it's changed your life.
Oh, absolutely.
In unexpected ways.
Some
pleasant, I imagine, some not so pleasant.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm like, keep the comments coming, whether they're nice or not. It helps my engagement, helps my metrics. So thank you to all of those people. But I want people to feel more comfortable fighting back. And I also want people to see other people fighting for them. I have so many people who are like, thank you for actually sticking up for me, for sticking up for my trans son, for helping, you know, for talking about my immigrant dad, right? And I also have had people tell me, I finally feel brave enough to speak out against certain things because I don't know we've always been given the room to do that.
Everyone who is a visible Democrat would want an influencer's endorsement. I don't know if you want to give one, but is there any voice you see among Democrats generally that you think gets it?
Jasmine Crockett.
Jasmine Crockett.
Jasmine Crockett. I mean, she's so smart. First of all, she's hilarious. She's charismatic, and she fights back. And people feel protected by leaders who they see fighting for them.
Not the first influencer, well, maybe the first influencer that's been at this august desk, not the last.
I'm honored.
And I will hope you will come back.
I would love to come back. I'll move in. I love it here.
That might not be necessary, but I do appreciate the sentiment. Suzanne Lambert, great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Jimmy Carter, I don't know if you caught this, has won a posthumous Grammy Award for narrating an audiobook of his Sunday school lessons delivered in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, the last ones of his life. This is the late president's fourth Grammy win. His grandson, Jason Carter, accepted the award on his grandfather's behalf. He thanked the Academy, saying, quote, having his words captured this way for my family and the world is truly remarkable. Carter died, as you may well remember, in December at the age of 100. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.